Ukraine. In fact, in 2013, Ukraine rejected Europe's economic partnership. This naturally cheesed them off, so they said that leader has got to go. So in 2014, there was a US-backed coup.
This is just bullshit. He's just lying.
Yeah, this is ridiculous. United States would never do that. Just 1 second. 1 second. Cuba is on the doorstep of the United States of America, but it was very close to Russia. And Russia wanted to send nukes to Cuba. The US was having...
Okay, can I just say how these situations are not the same? Where has negotiations occurred where the United States is going to be sending nuclear weapons to Ukraine? Dylan, will this video change your opinion on Russia? Let's all see it.
Cool. And you might be thinking, you know what, you're making excuses for Russia, mate. Yeah, this is ridiculous. United States would never do that. Just 1 second. 1 second. Cuba is on the doorstep of the United States of America, but it was very close to Russia. And Russia wanted to send nukes to Cuba. The US was having none of that. In fact, there's something called the Monroe Doctrine. You need to look at that, which the United States...
Wait, so the thing that's funny about this, and we can watch this from the start, but the thing that's funny about videos like this is, like, you hear it and he's like, oh yeah, you think that it's bad when Russia does these terrible things? Well, America did these terrible things. Okay? And like what okay, it's like, oh, you think it was bad when this person raped somebody? Huh? Well, didn't you hear Billy also raped someone? Oh god, well that's awful. They should both go to prison. Like, it's not good. Like, you do not justify bad actions by just pointing to other people and saying, well, they did bad things too. Somebody said Cuba was never invaded. That's not true. Bay of Pigs. Not to mention, Ukraine gave up its nukes for security guarantees. Budapest Memorandum.
Exactly.
Oh god, should we watch this video from the start? I'm interested. I'm actually interested.
Go for it if you want to.
Okay, this one got 8.6 thousand likes, 85,000 views. One day, wow, very popular video. This guy is putting out. Let's hear it. Very interested. Okay.
What the heck is going on in Ukraine? What the hell is a NATO? And why the heck is the United States of America telling other countries not to invade people? These are only a few questions that I'm sure you guys have, and we're gonna discuss them now.
That's a genius.
So yesterday, Russia entered Kiev, which is the capital of Ukraine. Initially, it only started with Western Ukraine, but now slowly.
Well, it was kind of a little bit pushed out of Kiev, if we're gonna be completely honest. Kind of feels a little out of March 1st, like, but okay, whatever. I guess he's not getting into really deep detail about the combat or anything.
Political analysts are saying most likely it's going to take Ukraine over. Now, we're living in the 21st century, yeah, and we know the media lies. So it's so difficult when you watch the news. You have to deconstruct everything. You have to see, okay, Russia today, this is what they're saying. Yeah, that's one side of the story. Then the other side of the story, you got your Sky News, you've got your BBC and CNN. And then in the kind of other spectrum, you've got Al Jazeera that's there.
Man, you know, it's so complicated, man. On one side, you see child getting blown up. You see cluster munitions hitting kindergartens. You see cathedrals getting blown up. You see flagrant lies by the Russian government as they say the Ukrainians were going to invade Russia in the Donbass region, doing false flag. Man, it's so difficult. Oh my god. But like, what's the RT perspective, man? Like, I can't. Like, what's the other side of the story of these children being arrested in Moscow? True story, by the way.
Then you've got Fox News. So as Muslims, what do? Do we support Russia? Do we support America? Don't be silly. We don't support anyone.
Pay attention.
America has
Well, no, wait. Backed up. Wait, can I also say I like the dichotomy here. Listen to it one more time.
news. So as Muslims, what do? Do we support Russia? Do we support America?
Neither of these countries are Ukraine. You don't. We're not telling you to support America. America doesn't need support. America's a nuclear power that is under no threat of invasion from anyone due to geographic, nuclear, and large standing military factors, right? It doesn't need your support. The country that would need your support is Ukraine. I like how it's no longer about, well, what about Ukraine, right? What about the Ukrainian people? What about their sovereignty? No, it's just, look at the giant geopolitical picture. America, Russia, forget the specifics. Just like, let's just look at the big power plays. We don't need, it's Russia or America. It's not about supporting Ukraine. It's about supporting Russia or America.
Don't be silly. We don't support.
Interesting about this? Sorry about that. You know what's also interesting about this? I mean, if you look at, for example, Crimean Tatars, which we watched a video a couple of days ago. The Tatars themselves usually are Muslim, and they're defending the Ukrainians.
Oh yeah, they actually, if you want to talk about Muslims in Ukraine, there are actually Muslim Tartars in Crimea that, of course, spoke out. I believe it was the Tartar Council exactly actually spoke out against the Russian Crimean annexation. When
awesome.
Russia annexed Crimea because they were scared about their rights being infringed upon, and actually many Tartars boycotted the quote-unquote referendum, which was very clearly rigged and rife of accusations of fraud and voter intimidation and just straight up lies when it comes to the referendum on whether and this seriously was the two options: whether A, Crimea was not going to be part of Ukraine, or B, Crimea was not going to be part of Ukraine after the Russians lied about invading, but then invaded anyway. The little green men story. That's a whole other thing. But if you want to talk about, I mean, I don't want to speak for the Muslim people. I'm not Muslim. I have no reason to speak for anyone else. But if we want to talk about like the Muslim position in Ukraine, I think the first people you should go to are the Tartars, which I assume he'll bring up.
By the way.
Tatar, sorry. He will probably bring them up. I can't pronounce anything correctly, but at some point he'll bring them up, I assume.
Yeah.
For anyone.
Pay attention.
America has invaded Muslim countries, so has Russia. Both have blood on their hands, mate. Frankly, you guys sort them out yourself. But
okay, Ukraine is its own country. It is the country in question getting invaded. So it's not a question of supporting America or supporting Russia. It's a question of supporting Ukraine. And there is a Muslim population within Ukraine that is fighting, actually, and many of them fighting on behalf of the Ukrainian government against the Russian invasion. And its representatives have spoken out against the Russian invasion. So if you wanted a Muslim perspective on Ukraine, you could ask Ukrainian Muslims.
just like with anything else, it's definitely worth looking at the facts. This is not just an isolated incident. Russia didn't just wake up and say, yo, I'm gonna invade Ukraine. Alright. So here, there's two main powers at force. You got NATO. NATO is like 30 countries, mostly from the West, and these are under the influence of the United States of America. And then on the other side, you've got Russia. So most analysts that talk about...
Wait, okay. I like, one side, it's NATO with all these countries. On the other side, Russia. Like, Russia doesn't have its own defensive agreements and military alliances with Belarus, Kazakhstan, okay, got it. Okay, got it on point. Got it. Russia, alone in the world.
About Ukraine and Russia don't start from a couple of months ago. They start from 1990. So after the Cold War, America wanted East and West Germany that had become united to join NATO. In other words, come under its own influence. Now Russia was like, yo, I mean, Germany has smashed us twice, mate. We've lost millions of people. How am I gonna go back to my people and say, yeah, by the way, America's got Germany now? So the United States goes, yo, we're gonna promise you that NATO are not gonna move, and I quote, 1 inch to the east.
But no, he's bringing this up. Okay, this is a bit frustrating. Okay, so if I can remember, I can't remember the German Chancellor for was it West Germany? I think it was said. I think it was to Gorbachev essentially that NATO would not move an inch. But the thing about that is that's a verbal. That's like a verbal.
Okay, so number one, wait, can you say who said that, for example? Say that one again.
I forgot the West Chancellor's name.
But wait. But it wasn't the Americans, was it? So number one, it wasn't the Americans. It wasn't number one. It wasn't. We never committed to anything. Okay, that's the first thing. Yeah. So he says the Americans did it. Number one, it wasn't the Americans. It was a German politician who made this quote. You can continue. I'm sorry. I just wanted to make sure people knew that.
Yeah, sorry. You made the bit larger point. Basically, we did not make those promises. And the second thing is that a lot of these countries in the East, they willingly chose to join NATO. They wanted to join NATO. NATO was just like, okay, we'll help you integrate, essentially. So it's like,
the thing is, I'm not like a NATO expansion. In fact, my position on NATO was kind of like, I don't know. It was like on a kind of a weird like tipping point. I was really like on the fences always about modern NATO and what's NATO's goal in the modern world. And literally until this invasion. And me, just like the majority of the Finnish population, for the first time in human history, the majority of Finns actually support Finland joining NATO because of this invasion of Ukraine. If you ask all the Baltic states, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Poland, Romania, Bulgaria, if you ask these states that used to be under Russian influence, right? Either Russian imperial influence or Soviet influence, if you ask them about NATO membership, Hungary, for example, if you ask these countries, they're 100% on board. These are countries that voluntarily joined. Why? Because they were scared about countries violating their sovereignty in the future. One country in particular. And if anything...
Any Muslim who is not on Ukraine's side probably hasn't read the Quran.
I'm not going to make religious dictations. That's your opinion, but thank you for the $5. I just called him Queef. Anyway, but that was his name. It's not my fault. Queef Jerky. So... Well, where was I? I lost my... He got me off center with his name. Where was I? Oh, come on. You were following me along. Okay. These nations... Okay, gotcha. You were distracted. Okay.
I was reading up, by the way, it was Helmut Kohl. That's the guy, because I was like, I'm very annoyed at forgetting the name. So it's Helmut Kohl. There we go. Okay. But... And by the way, the commitment was verbal. Am I correct? Well, yeah, it was not even really that much of a commitment.
It wasn't written down. It wasn't. I don't think the commitment should have been made in the first place. But if you look at the history of Chinese-American missile control negotiations, stuff like this literally happens all the time in geopolitics. Now, I wonder if he's going to bring up the Budapest Memorandum, because this is really important when you're looking at the history of Ukraine and Russian relations. And if this is left out, that'd be a huge crime, considering he's bringing up this moment that wasn't even formalized. But the second thing was formalized. But these nations joined voluntarily. Why did these nations join? Because they were worried about their sovereignty. They were worried about their sovereignty being infringed upon. By what country? Yeah. A few different countries. But the main one I want to talk about is, of course, Russia. And if you look at Vladimir Putin's 45-minute speech, he makes a 45-minute speech, which I know a lot of tankies would tell you to go watch it because they think it's a really intriguing speech. I want to encourage you to watch it because, number one, you'll learn that Putin is actually not as charismatic as you think he is. He's actually extremely boring. And two, the speech actually is just scary. And if you listen to it, many of the justifications he makes in that speech for the invasion of Ukraine can equally be applied in places like Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, and other countries. And when that's coupled with the fact that one of the Russian demands going into negotiations with the West on the Ukrainian issue was that that the West drops their nuclear assurances to Eastern European countries and withdraws troops from them. And this is following a Russian invasion of Ukraine, justifying all the Ukrainians who said, hey, we should join NATO because, the Russians will invade us. And then the Russians invade them. They prove them right. There's a reason why these countries joined, and Putin is proving the reason in front of the whole world. NATO had a identity crisis going into the 21st century of what does it do in a post-Cold War world. And Putin has answered that question with his tanks crossing the Ukrainian border.
Shortly afterwards, one of the United States' presidents, Clinton, what did he do? Yes, he let NATO continue eastwards. A Russian president goes, what the heck is going on here, mate? I thought we had an agreement. And the United States goes, mate, that was just a verbal agreement. And then after...
It was, yes.
Afterwards, there's dispute as to whether they said it, whether they didn't say it. But if you look at the National Security Archive, in there, not only did the United States leaders say it, British leaders said it, and so did the French. Since then, it's been madness. The United States, I'm gonna say under NATO, has been expanding. So
wait, he unironically isn't going to talk about the Budapest Memorandum. Okay, so he said, oh, we need to start in 1990, and then he just skips to today. What he doesn't cover is 2 years after 1990, Russia makes a commitment, because apparently American commitments matter. Russian verbal commitments matter. Written, finalized agreements on paper that have to do with nuclear arms, they don't matter. So after the collapse of the Soviet Union, Ukraine had a lot of things. One of the things it had was, nukes. And in a post-Cold War, obviously, the question of what to do with these nukes came up in Ukrainian and international politics. And the international community, it's 1994, not 1992. Thank you, chat. The international community was like, Ukraine, we want you to get rid of these nukes. But Ukraine, a new nation, finally gaining its independence after the collapse of the Soviet Union, right, is like, I don't know, chief. I mean, our borders have been historically infringed upon. We're a little scared. We're very scared. I like my over 1,000 nukes, kinda. I mean, this is kind of cool. Now, in reality, right, the idea that they were going to be able to modernize these nukes and be able to use them in the economic state Ukraine was in is it would take a lot of work. And it's honestly, the nukes probably would do more work for them away than in their country. But there was this idea of these nukes self-defense. You get the idea. Anyway.
Yeah. Can I also just... Sorry, you want to finish your point?
Interject. What was it?
So sorry, I just want to quickly say that you also ignored the whole partnership for peace thing that NATO was doing with regards to Russia. Like, you literally... Like NATO, the US, like that was like assuring like Russia basically like, okay, we're trying to work for global, like, I guess you could say European security over here. So I mean, the thing about it is that he's taking, I assume he means like that when he talks about the National Archives, I'm assuming he's referring to the Partnership for Peace program and all the speeches made therein, which would be very disingenuous and actually would be contriving essentially those statements. But so I just wanted to clarify that.
I want to stay back on the storyline. I think I was saying, sorry, okay, where was I?
Budapest, continue from there.
Okay. Budapest Memorandum. Anyway, the Ukrainians, they realized that these nukes economically would be a burden on them, and it's probably going to serve them better to get rid of them than to keep them. But they want security assurances. If they're going to give up one of the largest nuclear arsenals in the world, they want security assurances. And so a bunch of countries, including Russia, come together and sign a piece of paper saying that they will not infringe upon Ukrainian territory. And the Russian government signed it. The current government of the Russian Federation signed, as in the government that is currently still existing from 1994 onward, signed the Budapest Memorandum, guaranteeing Ukraine that it would not infringe upon its territorial integrity. Obviously, in 2014, it broke that agreement. It broke that agreement and showed that commitment to be a lie and not truthful. And they continued to break it in Donetsk, in the Donbass region, and they broke it again in the year of our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, 2020 as well. And so it's so weird to hear people specifically just talk about, hey, everybody, let's talk about this verbal agreement that was made. And I'll be like, you know what? If they weren't going to go with the verbal agreement, they shouldn't have made the verbal agreement. But this was a written agreement, and yet it gets no airtime whatsoever, even though the Russians made that security guarantee to the Ukrainians. It's absolutely bizarre.
So what the United States would do is they would conduct military parades in countries like Estonia, which were nearby. Imagine right near your country, there's madness going on. I mean, what are you going to think is happening? And then in 2000...
What do you mean?
Parades.
What is this going to do? Whatever.
In countries like Estonia, which were nearby. Imagine right near your country, there's madness going on. I mean, what are you going
to... be clear, the Russians also do military drills near Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania annually.
Exactly. I think is happening. And then in 2002, the United States of America left the Anti-Ballistic Treaty.
How is this? He just straight up skips the memorandum. He just straight up skips it.
Of course.
Which limits the missiles that both countries have. Now, if you're leaving an agreement like that, what are you telling the other party? If they're increasing the missiles, what are you going to do? Sit on the toilet reading a newspaper? Not only did they do that, they started arming the countries that were near Russia. In fact, if you look at one of the countries that's near Russia, that's got a United States base with nukes. No, it's not one of these unknown countries. It's Turkey, mate. Yeah, Turkey. And Turkey, ironically, is also with NATO. So after all that was going on, Russia developed hypersonic missiles. Now, Ukraine is right at the doorstep of Russia. That's the last straw. The United States has always been obsessed with Ukraine.
Wait, wouldn't Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania also be at the doorstep of Russia? And also, all those countries' justifications, whether you like it or not, the justification he made in his speech would equally be applied to these countries for invasions of these countries as well, saying that Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania's history are inextricably tied to the Russian people. And, you know, the Soviets carved up their territory. Everything he said would apply in most regards to these countries as well. But these countries, if they want to be part of a defensive agreement, in order for them to have their sovereignty, in order for them to have their democracy, they are perfectly allowed to be part of these defensive agreements. And Ukraine, if anything, the invasion of Ukraine justifies why Ukraine would want to join an organization like NATO.
In fact, in 2013, Ukraine rejected Europe's economic partnership. This naturally cheesed them off, so they said that leader has got to go. So in 2014, there was a US-backed coup.
This is just bullshit. He's just lying. Can you talk about this for a bit? I'm too frustrated.
I think he's referring to Euromaidan. He must be referring
to Euromaidan, yes.
Like he's, you know what's funny? He's completely gone over the fact that Viktor Yanukovych was president. He's going over all the Russian interference into Ukraine. He's going he's going completely past the Budapest Memorandum, and he's going to write, like, he's essentially, I guess you could say, perpetuating conspiracy that a lot of people unfortunately believe that, the Euromaidan protests, which, by the way, were actually more to do with Viktor Yanukovych's oppressive government than they were to necessarily do with the European Union, although that was like a catalyst, you could say. So to say that this was like a US-backed coup is it's insane to me. It wasn't. It really wasn't. It was the people protesting their authoritarian government.
So my question is simple. Where is the evidence that the CIA gave them weapons? Where is the evidence that the CIA supplied them? Where is the evidence that the CIA did any of this stuff? Is there any evidence? Has there been something posted? If there was, I'm sure he's about to show it.
Which is, you forcibly remove the current leader from their leadership. Now you might be thinking, yeah, but that's difficult to prove. No. There were public sightings of CIA Director John Brennan. In fact, where the protests were going on, you had Senator John McCain. You could see him. He was in the protest. The guy was on stage.
So no evidence. Just here was a U.S. official. He was spotted. And here is John McCain giving a speech in favor of a protest movement. This isn't evidence that America did a coup. If that's the standard for what is and isn't, America did a coup here, America did a coup here. It's simple. This is how we do then. If Russia tomorrow said, "Hey, Nepal, stop shooting all those protesters," and then there was a revolution in Nepal because they didn't like, the people didn't like getting shot. Now that's a Russia-backed coup because they said a public statement in support of it. That these words become meaningless when you make them mean something little. When I think America-backed coup, I'm like, oh my goodness. So America must have given them guns. America must have supplied them in this way. America must have done this, that, or that. But that's not what he's showing evidence of. He gives evidence of a speech and a government official being spotted. No evidence of supplies, no evidence of anything else.
Imagine you've got this happening next door. And you might be thinking, you know what, you're making...
Okay, so he was not able to substantiate it being a US-backed coup. Also, he didn't talk about why the Euromaidan protests happened. Did he talk about Russian interference in Ukrainian elections or Russian assassination attempts on Ukrainian officials? Did he talk about that? Did he talk about Russian interference in Ukrainian politics? Did he talk about the huge corruption in the Yanukovych administration? What about the brutality towards protesters that led to the escalation? He doesn't cover any of this because what he wants to do is he wants to walk back from his conclusion. Because if you laid out all of the information, it would show a clearer picture of how the invasion is clearly the fault of one man and one man alone for 90 to 95% of the factors that got involved here, and that is Vladimir Putin. He was the person who escalated the recent situation. I'm sure he'll get into recent escalations in a bit, and we can go off on that a little bit more, but what he's doing here is historiography, because you want to know what? I could justify anything, literally anything in the world to you, if I only give you very small pieces of information. If I said, did you know there was an instance where the United States bombed a city? Their population, there were civilians who died. There was, factories were blown up. Terrible damage to civilian infrastructure. And then those people fought back, but the United States invaded their country anyway. That sounds horrific, right, Stoic?
Yeah, I just
wait, stop. That sounds horrific, right, Stoic? It sounds terrible.
Oh, of course. Yeah, of course.
So the city was Dresden and the country was Nazi Germany. If you leave out all the other information, you can make a case for literally anything. If he leaves out the Budapest Memorandum, if he leaves out the corruption of Yanukovych's administration, if he leaves out the brutality towards protesters, if he leaves out a lot of this information, then of course his point seems so clear. Like, oh my gosh, thank you for removing the veil on my eyes. You revealed this deep, deep truth to the people. But it's bullshit. It's a crooked form of historiography. Not telling of history. It's a crooked form of historiography.
I would say it's a historical revisionism. I wouldn't use the historiography because I thought that was like essentially tabulating historical events in that. But I would say historical revisionism, definitely.
100%. We'll let him continue. I want to get to recent events because that is where it's the most clear cut that it's Putin fault.
Making excuses for Russia, mate. Yeah, this is ridiculous. United States would never do that. Just 1 second. 1 second. Cuba is on the doorstep of the United States of America, but it was very close to Russia, and Russia wanted to send nukes to Cuba. The US was having...
Okay, can I just say how these situations are not the same? Where has negotiations occurred where the United States is going to be sending nuclear weapons to Ukraine? You want to know what would be a good idea here? To have negotiations to ensure that nuclear weapons aren't sent to Ukraine. And if you want to talk about sending nuclear weapons to the border, what do you think about the Belarus removing its non-nuclear status and Putin upping its nuclear alert levels right next to Poland? How does Poland feel with Belarus removing its non-nuclear status?
Like, that guy punched someone, so now I can punch you and you can't be mad. 'Cause that guy did it first.
Thank you for the $10. I really appreciate it. What about that? If you want to talk about nuclear weapons and how that applies in this, by the way, this is a great freeze frame. If you want to talk about nuclear weapons and how it applies in this conflict, talk about Belarus removing its non-nuclear status in a referendum. Complete bullshit referendum, by the way. It was completely fraudulent, but it was a referendum, and Putin getting its nukes ready, banging its chest, talking about, how nuclear war is terrible and nuclear war would be a disaster for the world, upping its nuclear status. It's escalating when it comes to nuclear weapons here, okay? So if there's been no talk, as far as I'm aware, unless anybody can send me links that prove me otherwise, of the United States government saying, yes, we're going to put nukes in Ukraine. But we see right now, Belarus removing its non-nuclear status, assumably to put nuclear weapons inside of Belarus.
None of that. In fact, there's something called the Monroe Doctrine. You need to look at that, which the United States thinks it's its God-given right to secure the nations that are close to it for its own security. However, when you got Russia...
Can I say that you can be against two things at once? All you would have to say here in response to this is simple. Like, okay, that was bad. And it would be bad for America to go and interfere in the internal affairs of all the countries in its south and violate a nation's democratically elected mandate and try to do regime change wars just because we don't like that. And in many instances, when we have done that in the South America, that's been absolutely horrific. It's been absolutely horrific. And you want to know what I'm against? Even though Cuba is actually abstained from the vote and was saying largely semi-supportive statements of what's going on in Russia right now, you know what I would say about the Cuban administration? We shouldn't invade Cuba. That's my position. Putin feels other ways about Ukraine.
Russia, there's different standards that are being used. And then the leadership that was installed, backed by the United States of America, was very far-right, neo-Nazi leaning. And I mean, this is a very
German TV show Nazi symbols on helmets of Ukrainian soldiers.
far-right, neo-Nazi leaning.
Does he talk about the Wagner Group? Does he talk about polling when it comes to anti-Semitism and comparisons to Ukraine and Russia? 5% of Ukrainians believing Jews should not be citizens of Ukraine. 14% of Russians believing that Jews should not be citizens of Russia. Does he talk about Belarus's leader, Lukashenko's comments praising Adolf Hitler, saying that Germany reached as zenith, its top during Hitler, and not all the facts about the well-known figure Adolf Hitler is bad, right? Making apologia for Adolf Hitler. Belarus, the leader of Belarus, of course, being involved actively in this invasion of Ukraine. If part of this is the denazification of Ukraine, I think the denazification should be more directed at home in Russia than it should be directed in Ukraine. Not to mention, none of us really think that Putin's main problem here is whether somebody's a Nazi or not. Not me saying, of course, that the government of Zelensky is a Nazi government. The dude's a Jew whose ancestors survived the Holocaust, and the Azov Battalion's political party does not hold a single seat in government, by the way. But he's friends with the leader of the Wagner Group, the leader and founder of the Wagner Group, who's just a straight-up neo-Nazi. And not only is he friends with the guy, but Putin supplies the organization underneath him, the Wagner Group in question, with weapons. And they've gone off and they've fought in locations like Syria. In fact, we're getting reports right now that they might be active in Ukraine. Hopefully, the Azov Battalion and the Wagner Group would just go in the middle of a field and fucking kill each other. Hopefully, that's how this will all end.
And I mean, this is according to William Bloom. He says this. Now, Russia used the opportunity to take back Crimea. So you can see Russia is trying to secure the countries that are nearby it. Very similar to the United States. Is it right? Should you be taking over countries? I don't think so. Because China
Wow. Very brave. Brave and stunning.
wants to take over Taiwan. And last week there were rumorings that Chinese jets were entering Taiwanese airspace.
The same day Russian forces invaded Ukraine, 9 Chinese fighter jets entered Taiwan's air defense zone.
If you're looking at the two biggest superpowers and you're applying one standard to the United States and the other to Russia, I don't think Russia would take that. And from a purely academic point of view, you can see that Russia isn't just doing things randomly. Their surrounding countries have been encroached, and if you look at this map, you can see how much NATO has advanced towards Russia, and Russia feels like they gotta do something now. Alright guys, I hope that's enlightening.
Can I also say there's a few other things I'd want to highlight. Now, let's say we gave him everything, right? Like, let's say that, well, what if there was like a case where nukes were deployed in Ukraine and they got closer and all of this stuff and all these situations, and of course Russia has security concerns. Let's give him all of that and say that that was a possibility. Well, number one, it's not like Ukraine was going to join NATO tomorrow. Were we any closer recently to Ukraine joining NATO right now? Stoic? Was there any recent developments that were going to make Ukraine join NATO, or even the European Union up until the invasion?
Well, the thing about it is that, you know, it's quite funny. You could always just like give him like the counter argument, basically that, you know, Germany and France were stalling on Ukraine's ascension to NATO. It was being stalled purposely. So I mean, you could even like argue that, hey, NATO actually, it was not as eager as you make it out to be to incorporate Ukraine into NATO's infrastructure.
Ukraine added NATO membership to their constitution recently. Look, but the thing is, Ukraine could paint Zelensky could paint his dick the color of the NATO flag and wave it around like a helicopter in the Ukrainian parliament yelling, please let me join NATO, please. And that is not going to get him in NATO. That's not going to get Ukraine in NATO. He can do anything he wants unless NATO approves Ukraine getting into NATO. It means nothing. It means nothing. And so my question would be, was there any really substantial escalation when it comes to Ukraine making real advancements towards NATO memberships recently that should be made note of? Not really. Same thing applies to the European Union until, of course, the invasion, where now European Union membership is being talked about a lot more now, ever since the Euromaidan protests. Not even saying that joining the European Union justifies any invasion, or joining NATO justifies any invasion. But let's entertain this for like a little bit. So if there was no escalations on that front recently, where were the escalations? Well, the escalations was from Vladimir Putin putting 200,000 troops on the Ukrainian border. What did he do next? Then he put 80% of them in a position ready to attack. And now we know from leaked Russian intelligence documents that they decided to invade on the 18th of February. They had the plan ready to invade, and everything past that point was just them getting ready. They approved a plan of invasion on the 18th, and we just waited till the 24th for the invasion. Then he escalated further by actually invading the country and starting a massive bombardment campaign. Then he escalated even further by having Belarus remove its non-nuclear proliferation status. Then he escalated even further by beating his own chest about nuclear weapons and upping the nuclear readiness status. At every single step of the way, the Russian government has escalated the situation. Now you could say now that the combat started, and before even combat started, America was sending Ukraine weapons and all of this. That is true, but it was because we feared a scenario just like this happening. And what has happened? Exactly what American strategic planners and the Russian government feared most of all. A regime change war launched by the Russian government to reinstall either Viktor Yanukovych or some Russian puppet so Russia can have control of Ukraine's government and quash its democratically elected leadership and its democracy. We're seeing children die in hospitals. We're seeing kindergartens being bombed. Accusations of cluster munitions from NGOs like Amnesty International. We're seeing cathedrals get bombed, civilians dying, buildings collapsing, permanent damage to civilian infrastructure, hell, even damage to Holocaust memorials. Isn't that ironic? It's absolutely horrific. And for anybody to really try to pretend that the person who didn't escalate the situation was Vladimir Putin, I think honestly, it feels like half of them are doing it for attention and half of them are doing it to be contrarian. And 10% are doing it because maybe they genuinely believe.
Scripting.
That's 110%. My goodness.